My name is Mike Richfield. I'm here almost as long as Martin, actually. It's over 30 years in a wide variety of roles. Previously to my leadership of European sales, I was running our industrial and instrumentation team. So I may have met some of you at various conferences over the years, Electronica, for example, in the past. So 24% of our business is in Europe. That's based on the design investment. So we really track where we need to put our salespeople and our FAEs. So we invest, so 24% of our revenue comes from designs that are made in Europe. The actual amount produced in Europe is not that dissimilar. It's close enough, but a little bit less. But 24% of our revenue comes from designs made by our European customers. Again, you may have seen this slide before. This shows, I think, a theme between the things we're talking about. I'm going to start my case by briefly looking at the megatrends driving ADI investments, which have strong roots in and are good for both ADI and Europe. The ones I'm going to talk about are autonomous transportation of machines, automotive electrification, Industry 4.0, of course, and a little bit on 5G briefly as well, explaining why they're good for Europe and why they're good for ADI as well. I wasn't going to talk about digital health because some of the developments in digital health within ADI have not been made in Europe, but inspired by what Martin talked about, I want to talk, before I get on, just say that some of the key customers and the key leaders in healthcare are also European based. I mean, Siemens Healthineers, number one in CT in the world. Philips are in the top 3 in CT and number 1 in the broader digital and clinical health at that interface between healthcare in the home and healthcare in the hospital. So 2 extremely strong healthcare companies at the forefront of digital health in Europe, plus of course all the pharma companies. 5 of the top dozen pharma companies in the world are European based as well, and they're all moving into that intersection as well, trying to get involved in dealing directly with hospitals, dealing with patients directly in the home. So digital health is also something that's important for Europe and important for ADI as well. And of course, this is just a summary of all those customers. So why are the global megatrends good for Europe? Because it's a combination of extremely large customers. You see the car OEMs shown up there. You can see all of the largest customers in every industry, whether it's Airbus, whether it's Siemens, or whether it's Thales, or guys like Dyson in the prosumer space. There's also a lot of institutes, the Fraunhofer Institute, the Tyndall Institute. I'm sure plenty of institutes in Italy and other parts of Europe as well that are heavily engaged in working with. There's a very strong infrastructure in Europe to work with those big companies. And then, of course, there's also a strong European culture of startups. And those startups, whether they're in Cambridge, whether they're in London, whether they're going into EMEA in Europe, in Paris, in Copenhagen, in Sweden, a huge amount of startups in Europe, which are also driving innovation and working both with ADI in the different market segments. So if you look, though, first of all, at automotive, and I want to put in context why Europe is a key part of the megatrend development, and automotive is the first one. If you look at the automotive market in general, so first of all, look at the car OEMs. I mean, the number one seller of cars in the world is the VW Group, with all the various brands that they have. The 2 biggest car manufacturers in the premium segment are BMW and Daimler, based in Europe. And then, of course, you have Renault, who, as well as having a large European share, also own over 40% of Nissan and a share in Mitsubishi. So there's a strong leadership in the automotive OEMs in Europe. And then when you go and look at the top automotive suppliers, although there's been a lot of noise generated on a worldwide basis on technology leadership from the rest of the world, the reality is that Europe still has strong leadership in automotive development and in the tier 1 automotive suppliers. Bosch are number 1 in the world. Bosch employ over 400,000 people. I'm always amazed by that statistic when I hear a Bosch presentation. Over 400,000 people employed by Bosch. A large number of them actually based in Europe. So it's a huge number of people. Continental, of course, have 2 pieces, and this piece is excluding their tire business, which is half of their business as well. So Continental are another huge company, and even without tires are number 2 in terms of the automotive suppliers in the world. ZF have got up there as a more mechanical supplier by purchasing TRW, but ZF TRW also in the top 5 in the world. And if you look at the top 20, close to 50% are headquartered in Europe. So you'd add in guys like Valeo, you'd add in Hella, who of course make lighting, you add in Faurecia, who are more of a making panels and seating, but moving into electronics as well. And suddenly you see that Europe has an extremely strong position in automotive technology, and therefore those megatrends in terms of whether it's radar, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, or whether it's electrification, those megatrends are going to be positive for Europe, and also explain later on why they're positive for ADI. Moving on then to industrial automation. It's kind of using this as a slight proxy for Industry 4.0. Now, of course, Industry 4.0 is not just in automation, it's in process control, it's in a whole wide range of other industries as well. But industrial automation is kind of a proxy for it. So again, the list of the biggest industrial automation and smart instrumentation companies is dominated by companies headquartered in Europe and with significant R&D in Europe. Siemens, I mean, you associate Siemens both with power plants, but also with factory automation and motor control. The key areas that Siemens have dominated for many years, in the 83 years, whatever it is, since they've been founded, a long time. ABB, probably best known for robotics, but also strong in all those other automation areas as well. Number 2 in the world of industrial automation. And ABB are a company who really reduced their own focus and targeted much more on industrial automation in the last 5 years, I would say. And Schneider Electric. Schneider Electric are number 5 in terms of automation. They're actually bigger in revenues than both Emerson and Rockwell Automation. But Schneider are focused on circuit breakers and related equipment. The reason that they're number 5 in automation is more than half their business is in more of the power control, if you like, rather than automation itself. So then you're looking at a really significant number of companies headquartered in Europe. Of course, if you look at industrial automation as well, you can't forget the Mittelstand. I mean, there are hundreds of companies that we deal with in Germany with niche focuses in certain areas, mostly aimed at industrial automation, whether that's flow meters, whether it's kind of very specialized valve controls, whether it's specialized pump controls, fan controls. There are companies everywhere throughout Germany in particular, and the rest of Europe as well, which also drive Europe's leadership in industrial automation. And then, of course, we move to 5G and next generation of connectivity. So Huawei, of course, have been in the headlines recently for a number of reasons, in that they're a prominent part in the US-China trade disputes. Recently, I think they're pretty, interesting and kind of, I would say, smart offer in terms of licensing technology to a company who wants to enter the market and perhaps compete with their competitors. So they've been very, very prominent, and they are number 1. Huawei are number 1 in the world in market share in communications infrastructure. But if you look outside that, you'll see that Ericsson and Nokia are both in there. And in fact, HiSilicon, who are the number 3 in this particular survey we printed out, are the chip arm of Huawei. So HiSilicon are part of Huawei. So if you look at that, Ericsson and Nokia, numbers 2 and 3 in the world. So I think it's something that there's a lot of articles have been in the press recently, and I talked about it last night in terms of the leadership technology from China and other places. But Europe is extremely strong in 5G technology with 2 of the leading 3 players in the world, effectively 2 of the leading 5. There are 5 infrastructure players in the world, and Ericsson and Nokia are up among them. So I think the next thing to talk about is showing that the megatrends are good for Europe and European companies is one thing. What I'd like to do is to show as well that this is good for both ADI and for ADI in Europe and our investments in Europe. So ADI have, at a corporate level, I think Dan covered with this, we've invested over $4 billion in R&D over the past 5 years. And we've invested over $1 billion in 2019, with more than 30% of that targeted at those emerging kind of growth industries. I mean, the rest of it, clearly, we also focus on developing the technology. We focus something on the emerging businesses. We obviously focus some of our R&D on the H1 technologies that are needed to just maintain our leadership in areas in industrial and other areas outside these emerging growth businesses. But that's a huge amount of R&D per year. And if you recall again from what Martin said, there was at 6.2 billion in revenue in 2018. That number is about 18 to 19% of sales, which is, again, a statement of ADI's commitment to innovation, where we both develop the technology and bring it to market in a useful way to our customers. So then, relating that to Ireland, ADI has been in Ireland since 1976. So that's just a bit more than 10 years since the foundation of the company. So as you can imagine, that was a fairly major step for ADI. I think our revenues at the time were less than $200 million. So quite a fairly low number for a company deciding to move outside its headquarters in the US. There's a whole load of history and myths and statements as to how ADI chose Ireland and how we were at one stage on the short list with Egypt, I think it was. And the decision was made for Ireland. And actually not really, even though ADI headquartered in Boston, not related to the dreaded Irish diaspora, because we've established that since by sending people like Martin to Boston, right? But it really related to, Ireland had just joined the European Union in 1973. I'm related, I suppose, to the feeling that there was an educated workforce that could be trained in semiconductors. Obviously, nobody in the country had any knowledge of semiconductors at the time, but could be trained in it and spoke English, I suppose, relatively close to the US. So that was 1976. We started here with a few people came in from the US, mostly local people. We now have nearly 1,300 employees, over 10,000 plus years of experience of the people here, and 60% of them are engineers or technicians. So this site, and you'll see it a bit more as you go around, is a combination of this building, I'll talk about that in a minute, and a fab and some other associated buildings around. It's a real kind of campus here within Limerick. So if you look to see, the history of ADI in Ireland and in Europe. So ADI, as I said, was founded in 1976. The original focus of the company was on precision converters. In fact, originally I think it was mostly D2A converters. D2A converters on CMOS and following on by CMOS processes, but initially on CMOS processes. We then, of course, went after that. You do some DACs, we do some converters. We eventually added track and holds onto the converters to make it sampling converters. If you remember, anybody who's remembers back in the old days, we had companies offering standalone track and holds and sample and holds. They're still there for really niche applications, but that was a standard part of the business there. You'd offer somebody an amplifier, a track and hold, an A to D converter, some D2As, all pretty much monolithic building blocks that customers then had to put together themselves to build a system. So that's how we started off. One of the things that they did do, even from that starting point, is we developed that expertise in precision measurement, which has really benefited us up until today and helped us in our future investments in areas like industrial automation. But then in the early 2000s, and I was involved peripherally, and Leo was heavily involved in this, was to bring different technology, to decide to focus on the first RF circuits developed here, which were PLLs. We had some fellows here within the company, one of whom recently passed away, but he was a key driver in bringing that PLL technology. When people told us at the time, well, there's no point in competing with this stuff, everything's already been done. But we started looking at how do we get the lowest phase noise, how do we get the best possible PLLs, PLLs with VCOs, and we started selling those to the then kind of fairly nascent industry in wireless infrastructure. Ericsson and those guys just really starting to build the 2G networks, if you like, at the time. So that set us up for our future developments and future efforts in RF technology that we'll again talk about a bit later. Then into the mid-2000s, ADI at that stage, and I remember all these, again showing you how long I've been here, remember all this, we decided that now is the time to reinvest in automotive. For a while, a lot of the automotive requirements, other than the airbag sensors that we did, were fairly low end. We didn't need to do too much for the electronics required in the car. We saw that changing in the mid-2000s, and we decided to invest in some automotive developments here. What it does for you when you start working in automotive is it brings you that mindset. You visit an automotive customer, the first thing that they try and find out is how much sales do you have in automotive, and therefore how much are you dependent on the market, and have you got an automotive mindset? which is roughly translated as having a lot of documentation, a lot of thinking as to the impacts of everything you do, and of course, very strong quality levels. One of the first products we developed, and in fact my own team were involved in this at the time, were the products for start-stop, for 12-volt battery control, which is used subsequently in the start-stop systems. And ADI still have by far the greatest share in start-stop control chips today. So that's something which we started off from in the mid-2000s. And we developed then, since then, into various other battery management technologies and into magnetic sensing, for example, which is shown there in the slide. In about 2010, and Dennis may tell me it's a bit earlier, we've always had obviously the fab here, but I think we started investing a lot more in terms of sensor development, making sure we had a separate fab area to be able to do this for various types of sensors. And that set us up for where we're going today with a huge capability for integrating sensors and various precision and current conversion and measurement technology. And I'll show a slide on that in a minute as well. And of course, up to about 2014, we then started working and had a much greater team here. In addition to all the rest, everything else is continuing in its own streams of industrial and sensors and automotive. But we expanded the RF development stream to work on products which are bringing us to the radar type products we have today, from 24 up to 77 gigahertz radar technology. So that's really the history of Limerick and the history of the development teams here, of those 1,300 people today. One of the things that I briefly mentioned, I know Leo's going to cover this. I'm always nervous covering this when I have Dennis Doyle in the room as well, in case I say something which is completely wrong. But the one thing that I think we'll all agree on is this is a unique fab in Europe. And some of you will be visiting that fab later on today. The ones people in that fab have the orange jumpsuits to keep them, or boiler suits to keep themselves completely separate from the people in the other fab where they wear white suits because they have to be completely kept separate. And the key feature about this fab is the addition of many more elements for sensor developments. So if you look at the periodic table there, the blue materials are for standard BiCMOS processes. So those materials are used in BiCMOS processes anywhere in the world. And there are hundreds of fabs around the world with that process capability and those material capabilities. Within this fab here, we've added all of the other metals, mostly metals, but the other elements, mostly metals, which enable sensor development. It's enabled our, for example, the isolators, which is a key product line from ADI, are manufactured in that fab. The isolator elements, we manufacture RF MEMS switches in the fab using, I think it's gold and ruthenium. We manufacture our magnetic sensors. We're manufacturing gas sensors and all the kind of stuff on pH, other sensors in this fab. And that's because of this unique capability of the various kind of metals we can bring to it and the development expertise we've built up over decades in the fab. So moving a little bit on to just the side here in terms of environmentalism, this is a statement from Vince, and I won't read the whole statement. It was made actually this year in terms of actively fighting climate change and by delivering hyper-efficient, environmentally focused technology solutions through operations designed to minimize our own environmental impact. And he has followed through on that. I was at a recent call with ADI leaders, and he talked about how his view was that companies like ADI needed to become activists. So it wasn't enough for us just to passively, if you like, produce the technology or wait for somebody to ask us to do it. We had to become activists working with other companies to really understand what was needed to have a significant impact on the climate crisis and to work together with other companies involved in this area. I don't have any actual details as yet as to what we're doing, but it certainly is something which struck me as being a more positive way of working rather than simply just saying, let's see if our technology can help to become activists in this. And Limerick is actually a good example of a plant which is optimized to minimize our own environmental impact. So this plant here, this building here, the European R&D Centre, which is where you're based now, was built 4 years ago. It cost about 50 million euros, so a pretty hefty investment and a statement of ADI's confidence in Ireland and in Europe. The facility is close to net zero carbon emissions. We essentially have a You see all the statements there of electric vehicle charging points and secure cycle spaces, etc. The 55% reduction in water usage with rainwater. We've lots of rainwater here. So we collect the rainwater in large tanks and we use that for the toilets and for all the foliage and the plants you see outside. Despite the complaints about the cooling system, I will say that we have solar panels which help us on heating and energy generation, and then we have in the non-solar panel area, especially reflective material which helps us in cooling. So there's everything within this facility has been designed to have the minimal impact on the environment. And I said it was opened 4 years ago. We've had a lot of awards for it. There'll be we're going to run, I think, a video in the cafeteria during lunchtime, so you can have a look to see some more details about that. So that's the Limerick site. We do, in addition to that, we have development sites in other parts of Europe. So we have sites in Edinburgh for power, in Newbury, in Munich, in Valencia, and in Turkey, in Istanbul. So various sites. Turkey was an RF site which we acquired with Hittite. Valencia we opened ourselves because of the quality and engineering people in universities in Spain. Munich came with LTC, and we developed our battery management chips there. And of course Edinburgh and Newbury we've had for a long time for power and converters. If you look at ADI overall, not only are we working within the teams here, over 33 different nationalities in Ireland. Over 6% of US patents with an Irish inventor came from ADI in Ireland. We're also, of course, partnering in terms of developing solutions with our distributors, Arrow, Semitron, Anglia, and others, and with various other partners throughout the territory. And unfortunately, I don't have one from Milan. I don't have Milan in this either, but we have been working in Milan. What? And Turin. And I will say, so one of the things I will say in terms of our, before I say this, our offices in Europe, ADI have significant FAE and sales support in Germany, in Italy, in France, in Spain, in the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway, UK and Ireland, and Austria, Switzerland, and most of Eastern Europe that we cover from one location, and Turkey and Israel. So we have a pretty strong presence throughout the whole region. And within the universities, we basically hire a co-op here is an intern in other countries. So 50% of the interns that we hire, and we hire a lot of graduates. You can see 30-odd graduates in Ireland a year, 30 grads in Ireland a year, 50 in Europe overall. 50% of those interns who work with us come back and join the company. So we have a very strong engagement with all these universities in Ireland, in Germany, in Spain, and throughout Europe. So now I think just wanted to change a little bit and to move a bit on to the details and examples of some of the developments driven from European operations. And these are just a taster of what we'll develop a bit further later on from Kevin, Chris, and Patrick. So I'm not going to go into huge detail on them. I haven't got much time, either. So autonomous driving. So this is something which both autonomous driving and automobile electrification have both had significant development capacities within Europe. I mentioned already that the EU share between the tier ones is 70%. So that 70% is the share of Europe in radar for level 1 and level 2 ADAS. The 77 gigahertz ADI chip developments on radar have been driven and developed here in Limerick. Our development on cooperative radar, which Chris will talk about later on, have been developed in Simeo, the company we purchased in Germany. So all of our radar development, really the leading edge radar development for ADI is in Europe. Our battery management technology has been developed in part at least from a significant group we have in Germany, and they were part of LTC. So in general, Europe has played an extremely large role in ADI's technology development in automotive. So moving to, sticking with automotive a little bit in terms of the BMS. This BMS products, in terms of the precision accuracy directly translates to maximizing battery capacity and range with the fastest charge time. So that's what the ADI BMS products give you. Most of those, as I said, have been developed in Europe. The BMS products enable the fastest electrical car in the world. So just in case you don't know what that one is, it's made by a company called Rematch, who are based in Croatia. They make 10 to 20 cars a year. Concept Car 1 and Concept Car 2 are the ones they have out there. But the 0 to 100 kilometers in 1.85 seconds, and the thing goes to greater than 300 kilometers an hour max speed. So it's a pretty impressive car. And just to get it right, I'm going to read part of the quote from Matti Rematch, who is the founder. I've been to Rematch, actually. It's a pretty impressive company. As well as making the cars, because you're probably not going to survive on 10 to 20 cars a year, they also do battery packs for other companies. So other, probably more high-end sports cars, they do whole battery packs as well. But he said, our application of battery management systems are among the most demanding in the world, requiring the highest accuracy, massive current and voltage draws over very short timescales, and rapid dynamic adjustment within the battery management control system. And we've adopted the ADI portfolio of battery management chips across our complete product line. So that's pretty positive, and most of those that have been developed within Germany. Talk a little bit about ferries. So this is actually a combination of BMS and IoT and some of our wireless technologies. Both of these applications are actually in Norway. So we're using battery management. In one case, we're using what's known as the wireless battery management technology in the one in the ferry, in the first one. And in the second one, it's the battery management technology and a lot of other control and monitoring functions. The first one uses an autonomous ferry. Of course, Norway has lots of water and lots of fjords and lots of ferry requirements. So the first one's an autonomous ferry that basically has a huge battery pack that goes across a pretty short journey, I don't know, 10-minute journey. And then they only have a minute at each end to be able to recharge the ferry and send it back again. And that's entirely done using ADI wireless BMS technology, and it's going into service, I think, this year or early next year. The second one is related to a company in Norway also who have a fertilizer factory. They want to get from the fertilizer factory to the port, which is a significant distance away, by car, and they had 100 diesel truckloads and 40,000 fertilizer truckloads per year, which they're planning to eliminate. This is not going to service till 2022 with another, whether it's autonomous or just battery-controlled ferry that's going to take them from somewhere very close to their facility to the port and onto ships to go elsewhere. So that's two other examples of ADI technology developed in Europe and combating the climate crisis. And almost finally, software-defined I/O. Again, Martin actually mentioned this today, and this is something that came from our huge knowledge of industrial automation built up over years within the Limerick site in particular, but within ADI also. So one of the biggest problems you have with I/O systems, particularly process control I/O, is you have these huge cabinets, and you're adding all the time different analog inputs, digital inputs, analog outputs, digital outputs, but often it's not very clear which ones you need. It's certainly not easy to change them. If you're going to change them, you have to send electricians in to rewire the whole thing, find somewhere where it's free, and put in a new analog input or analog output or digital output. So ADI have worked on software-controlled I/O. It may sound easy, but it's not, because you have to be able to have one chip which takes into account all of the varying powers, the varying kind of ramp times. There's an awful lot of fault mechanisms of somebody putting in the wrong input. There's a huge amount of understanding of the system that needs to be taken into place to build these software-controllable I/O chips. And we've done that based on that huge knowledge we built up over many years. And we have a number of lead customers in Europe, both in building automation and in industrial automation, using this software-defined I/O developed in the Limerick site from our systems understanding built over many years. So finally, I think I just want to say that I think ADI and Europe is actually the perfect combination for innovation. I mean, we've been in ADI, been around for over 50 years and counting. We've been in Europe in Ireland for over 40 years and counting, and of course in the other European countries for many years as well. I think we've seen that increasing digitalization and automation is a good thing for business and society, and that working together in Europe, we can really make an impact, whether that's in electrification, whether it's in Industry 4.0, in connectivity, we can make a difference. So ADI and Europe, the perfect combination for innovation.